3 days after the Battle of Proxima, the galaxy was trying to understand what had happened. The Devourer threat was over. The mechanical ships that had terrorized entire star systems now drifted as lifeless. HULKS scattered across a dozen systems. Their hive-mind consciousness had been shattered beyond repair, but the victory had come from the most unexpected source. The humans who had been dismissed as weak and irrelevant had not only survived on their own but had developed technology and strategies that surpassed anything the galactic community had achieved. Ambassador Haiyan Wu stood once again in the council chambers, but everything was different now. The beings who had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now looked at him. With a mixture of awe, gratitude, and deep shame, the old ambassador looked exactly the same as he had 6 months earlier. When they had voted to exclude his people from the alliance, his simple blue suit was neat and clean, his gray hair was carefully combed, and his eyes were still kind, but there was something new in his expression, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. The Council Prime rose from his seat, his insectoid form trembling with emotion. Ambassador Haiyan Wu, he said, his translated voice carrying across the chamber, "We owe you our existence. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Thing Wu listened to the translation through his earpiece, then smiled the same gentle smile he had worn when leaving the chamber 6 months earlier. "You owe us nothing," he replied calmly. "We did what we did because it was right, not because we expected anything in return." Ambassador Veltar of the crystalline hegemony stepped forward, his crystal form no longer flashing with arrogance but dim with shame. "But surely you will rejoin the galactic community now," he said, his voice like breaking glass. "Your technology, your strategies. We need your guidance to prevent such threats in the future." The human ambassador shook his head slowly, and the simple gesture somehow carried. The Proxima system was supposed to be where the galaxy made its final stand. Admiral Zorketh stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for what everyone knew would be their last battle. 300 ships from 40 different species floated in formation around Proxima Centauri. It was everything the Coalition had left. Every warship, every support vessel, every desperate captain who refused to surrender without a fight. But even this massive force felt small compared to what was coming. The Devourers had consumed 7 star systems in the past month. Their mechanical fleet now numbered over 12,000 ships. Each victory had made them stronger, smarter, more efficient at the art of destruction. They had learned to counter every Coalition weapon, to predict every Coalition tactic. Admiral Zorketh had fought in more battles than any living warrior. His species, the warrior caste, had been soldiers for 10,000 years. They understood war better than any other race in the galaxy. But today he felt something he had never experienced before. Hopelessness. "All ships report ready for engagement," he commanded, his voice carrying across the communication channels to every vessel in the fleet. "It has been an honor serving with you all." The responses came back in dozens of languages, but they all meant the same thing: "We are ready to die fighting." Space itself seemed to tear open as the Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace. The mechanical swarm was like a living thing, a writhing mass of metal and energy that blocked out the stars. It was larger than anything the Coalition had ever seen, a nightmare of consumption and destruction. The Devourers did not hesitate or negotiate. They simply began their attack. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from the mechanical ships, striking Coalition vessels with perfect accuracy. The battle that was supposed to be humanity's last stand was over before it began. Captain Yilden of the Crystalline Defense Force watched her beautiful crystal ship shatter under Devourer fire. The living crystal screamed as it died, a sound that cut through space itself. Her crew of crystal beings shattered along with their ship, their light going out forever. The Saurian battle group tried their traditional ramming tactics, but the Devourers had learned from previous encounters. Mechanical tentacles reached out to grab the attacking ships, crushing them like eggs. Before they could make impact, the Aquarian submarines that had been modified for space combat found their water-filled hulls breached by Devourer cutting beams. The brave aquatic warriors drowned in the vacuum of space, their gills unable to process the nothingness around them. Commander Rickstahl of the Tech Union tried to use his ship's advanced computers to coordinate the defense, but the Devourers had learned to hack Coalition systems. His own ship turned its weapons on nearby vessels controlled by the mechanical enemy. The battle was not a fight, it was a slaughter. Coalition ships died by the dozens, while the Devourers adapted to every desperate tactic. Within an hour, the greatest fleet in galactic history was reduced to scattered survivors. Running for their lives, Admiral Zorketh prepared to give the order to retreat. There was no point in sacrificing more lives in a hopeless battle. The galaxy was lost, and there was nothing left to do but delay the inevitable. Then something impossible happened. The Devourer advance suddenly stopped. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began to drift aimlessly. The mechanical precision that had made them unstoppable was replaced by confusion and random movement. What is happening to them? Demanded Admiral Zorketh, staring at his tactical display in disbelief. His answer came in the form of a voice on the emergency frequency. A voice speaking in perfect, unaccented galactic standard with a calmness that seemed impossible in the middle of the greatest battle ever fought. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Donghyun of the Terran Defense Force. We are beginning targeted strikes on Devourer command nodes. Please maintain your current positions and avoid the marked sectors. The Coalition fleet stared in amazement as human ships appeared from nowhere. They were unlike anything anyone had seen before. Sleek, dark vessels that seemed to bend light around them, making them almost invisible against the stars. The human ships moved through the Devourer fleet like ghosts, striking at specific targets with surgical precision. They did not try to fight the entire mechanical swarm. Instead, they attacked individual ships in exactly the right places to cause maximum disruption. How are they getting past the Devourer defenses? Whispered Commander Teclon of the Saurian fleet. Those mechanical ships have shields that can stop anything. The answer became clear as the Coalition watched the human tactics unfold. The humans were not trying to overpower the Devourers. They were using the mechanical fleet's greatest strength against them. Every Devourer ship was connected to every other ship through a complex network that allowed them to share information and coordinate attacks. It was this network that made them so effective, but it was also their weakness. Captain Minjun of the human ship Silent Strike spoke over the communication channel as his vessel made a deliberate attack run on a Devourer command ship. Remember, the network is everything. Cut the connections and they are just scrap metal. The human ship struck the command vessel and exploded in a brilliant flash of light. But the explosion was not random. It was precisely calculated to sever the network connections between hundreds of Devourer ships. Without the network guidance, the mechanical ships began to malfunction. Some attacked their own allies, others spun in circles, unable to determine friend from foe. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable was breaking down. More human ships appeared, each one targeting a specific weak point in the Devourer network. It was like watching a surgeon perform an operation on a giant mechanical brain. Each cut was precise and deliberate, designed to cause maximum disruption with minimum force. The Coalition forces watched in awe as the tide of battle turned. The Devourers that had seemed invincible were suddenly vulnerable. Their own size and complexity had become a weakness that the humans were exploiting with ruthless efficiency. But the human ships were not trying to destroy the entire fleet. They were performing a kind of technological surgery, severing the connections that held the Devourer hive mind together. Admiral Donghyun coordinated the attack. From his flagship New Korea, the human admiral was calm and professional, even as his ships sacrificed themselves to save the galaxy target. The primary network hub, he ordered all ships focus fire on the central command structure. Remember, we only get one chance at this. The humans had studied the Devourers for months, while the rest of the galaxy thought humanity had disappeared. They had learned that the mechanical swarm was not just a fleet of ships, but a single vast intelligence distributed across thousands of vessels. Cut the right connections and the intelligence would fragment into isolated pieces that could not coordinate their actions. The final attack came from Captain Sojin of the human destroyer Quiet Thunder. She piloted her ship directly into the heart of the Devourer command structure, knowing it was a suicide mission for Earth. She transmitted as her ship penetrated the mechanical defenses for humanity, for the galaxy that never believed in us. The explosion, when Quiet Thunder detonated, was visible from 3 star systems away. It tore through the central command hub like lightning through water, and suddenly the Devourer network went silent. 12,000 mechanical ships suddenly found themselves alone for the first time in their existence. They had no orders, no coordination, no shared intelligence. They were just machines floating in space. The Coalition fleet stared in amazement as the Devourers began to shut down one by one without the network to guide them. They had no purpose, no mission, no reason to continue fighting. In less than an hour, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced was reduced to lifeless metal drifting in space. Admiral Donghyun transmitted a final message to the Coalition fleet. The Devourer network has been severed. All remaining mechanical units are now inactive. We are transmitting shutdown codes to ensure they cannot reactivate. The human fleet began to withdraw as quietly as they had arrived, their dark ships fading back into the darkness between stars. Admiral Zorketh tried to contact them. Wait, he called out over the communication channels. We need to talk. We need to understand. But the human ships were already gone, vanished into the void as if they had never existed at all. The galaxy was saved, but no one understood how or why. The humans had appeared from nowhere, won an impossible victory, and then disappeared again, without asking for anything in return. It was the most human thing anyone could imagine. The Devourer fleet struck the Altair system like a tsunami of metal and death. Admiral Kexrin of the Coalition Defense Force watched from her flagship as 3,000 mechanical ships swarmed into the system, consuming everything in their path. The Admiral belonged to a species called the Ethereals, who looked like living energy contained in crystalline shells. They were ancient beings who had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, but even they had never faced anything like the Devourers. All ships engaged the enemy, she commanded. Her voice was transmitted across 200 Coalition vessels representing 30 different species. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, but against the Devourers it felt small and fragile. The battle began with long-range weapons fire. Coalition ships launched missiles and energy beams that could destroy planets. The Devourers responded with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics, energy blasts that curved around shields, particle beams that passed through armor like it was not there. Captain Yex Mole of the Aquarian Defense Force commanded a heavy cruiser called Deep Current. His ship was designed for underwater combat on his homeworld, but it had been modified for space warfare. The aquatic crew moved through water-filled corridors as they fought to save their ship. We are taking heavy damage, he reported to the fleet command. The Devourers are adapting to our weapons faster than we can fire them. That was the terrifying truth about the mechanical enemy. They learned every time a Coalition ship fired a weapon, the Devourers analyzed it and developed a counter. Within minutes, weapons that had been effective became useless. The crystalline hegemony had brought their most advanced warships, vessels made of living crystal that could reshape themselves during battle. But even these amazing ships were being overwhelmed. The Devourers had learned to shatter crystal with sonic weapons that made the beautiful ships explode like Glass Commander Victus of the Saurian battle group tried a different approach. His people were warriors who believed in close combat and personal courage. He ordered his ships to ram the Devourer vessels, hoping the physical impact would succeed where energy weapons had failed. It worked for about 10 minutes. The mechanical ships were not prepared for such an aggressive tactic, and several Devourer units were destroyed by ramming attacks, but then they adapted again. The next wave of Saurian ships found the Devourers ready with new defensive measures. The mechanical ships began sprouting spikes and cutting edges that turned ramming attacks into suicide missions. Worse, they started using the metal from destroyed Coalition ships to make themselves stronger. Every ship they consumed made them more dangerous. Dr. Zenith of the Science Collective was monitoring the battle from a safe distance, trying to understand how the Devourers worked. Her species looked like floating brains with tentacles, and they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. But even their advanced minds could not figure out the mechanical enemy. They are not just learning, she transmitted to the fleet command. They are evolving. Every destroyed ship, every weapon they analyze, every tactic they encounter makes them more effective. They are becoming a perfect fighting machine. The truth was even worse than Dr. Zenith realized. The Devourers were not just copying Coalition technology, they were improving it. A human laser that took 2 seconds to recharge became a Devourer weapon that fired continuously. A Saurian armor that could stop most projectiles became Devourer hull plating that was twice as strong. Captain Yex Mole transmitted his final message as his ship was being consumed. "They are not just destroying our ships," he said, as mechanical tentacles wrapped around Deep Current. "They are learning from them. Every defense we mount, they counter within minutes. Every tactic we try, they adapt to immediately." The retreat from Altair was a disaster of the first magnitude. The Coalition fleet that had entered the system with 200 ships limped away with less than 60. The Devourers had learned everything they needed to know about Coalition tactics, technology, and strategy. More importantly, they had consumed enough matter to double their fleet size. What had started as 3,000 ships was now 6,000 and growing. Admiral Kexrin called an emergency meeting of all surviving commanders. The holographic conference room aboard her flagship was filled with the images of officers from dozens of species. All of them looked defeated. "We cannot fight them conventionally," she announced. "The Devourers adapt too quickly to any strategy we employ. We need new approaches." But what new approaches were there? The Coalition represented the military wisdom of hundreds of species. They had tried every type of weapon, every known tactic, every strategy that had ever won a battle. Nothing worked against an enemy that learned from every encounter. "Commander Telrix of the warrior caste spoke up." "The humans," he said, his voice quiet. "We should have kept the humans." The suggestion was met with uncomfortable silence. Everyone remembered the vote 6 months earlier when they had excluded humanity from the Alliance. It had seemed so reasonable then. The humans were weak, their ships were primitive, their contribution would be meaningless now facing an enemy that made their advanced technology useless. They realized what they had lost. Humans had always fought differently. While other species relied on superior firepower or advanced shields, the humans used tricks and surprises and strategies that made no sense until they worked. The Devourers continued their advanced system by system. The Coalition forces fell back again and again. Each battle was shorter than the last. As the mechanical swarm grew larger and smarter, the Rigel system fell in 4 hours. The Vega colonies lasted only 2 refugee ships filled with civilians fled toward the galactic core carrying stories of worlds consumed in minutes. Entire civilizations were being erased as the Devourers turned planets into raw materials. For more ships on the plant world of Sylvana, the tree-like inhabitants tried to hide underground, thinking the Devourers would only take surface materials, but the mechanical swarm was thorough. They consumed the soil, the rocks, even the planet core, leaving nothing but empty space where a beautiful world had existed for millions of years. The Aquarian homeworld tried to defend itself by hiding underwater. The ocean-dwelling species thought their cities would be safe beneath kilometers of water. But the Devourers simply consumed the water along with everything else, turning the planet into a dry husk. Each victory made the mechanical fleet stronger and smarter. The Devourers were not just consuming matter, they were learning about every species in the galaxy. They studied Coalition tactics and developed counters. They analyzed Coalition technology and built improvements. They even learned about Coalition psychology and used fear as a weapon. Captain Meltor of the Tech Union tried to create a computer virus that could disable the Devourer network. Her species were the best programmers in the galaxy, and their digital weapons had ended wars without firing a shot. But the virus lasted less than an hour before the Devourers adapted to it and sent it back improved. The mechanical swarm was becoming unstoppable. Every defense the Coalition erected was overcome. Every weapon they developed was turned against them. Every strategy they tried was countered within minutes. In the Council chambers, desperation had replaced the earlier confidence. Species that had once competed for dominance now begged for any solution that might save them. "We need something unexpected," Ambassador Veltar pleaded, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. "Something the Devourers cannot predict or adapt to, but what could be unexpected to an entity that learned from every encounter?" The Devourers had studied Coalition technology for months. They knew every weapon, every tactic, every possible strategy. They had fought every species in the galaxy except one. The humans, whispered someone from the back of the chamber. They were always good at unconventional warfare. The suggestion hung in the air like a prayer. Everyone knew it was true. Humans had always approached warfare differently. They did not try to overwhelm enemies with superior force. Instead, they looked for weaknesses and exploited them in ways no one expected, but humanity was gone vanished into the depths of space. The galaxy had thrown them away when they were not needed, and now it was too late to ask for help. The Devourers moved closer to the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. The mechanical swarm now numbered over 10,000 ships, and it was still growing every day, brought new reports of systems falling to the unstoppable advance. The coalition prepared for their final stand in the Proxima system. It would be their last chance to stop the Devourers before the mechanical swarm reached the core worlds where billions of civilians waited in terror, but everyone knew the truth: the coalition had already lost. They just had not died yet. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when the Devourers arrived at the Andromeda relay point 3 months ahead of schedule. Commander Teclon of the Saurian Defense Force was the first to see them through his ship's sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. The mechanical swarm was twice as large as their intelligence had predicted. Where they had expected maybe 1,000 ships, they now faced over 3,000. The Devourers had been busy in the outer rim, consuming everything they could find and turning it into more of themselves. Teclon was a veteran warrior who had fought in dozens of battles over his 40-year career. His species, the Saurians, looked like upright dinosaurs with thick armor plating and sharp claws. They were born fighters, and fear was not something they felt often. But today Teclon felt afraid. Immediate retreat. He ordered all ships fall back to Rally Point 7. The Saurian fleet was fast, but the Devourers were faster. The mechanical ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, consuming small asteroids and debris as they flew. Each piece of matter they ate made them stronger, and there was a lot of matter in Space 3. Saurian ships did not make it to the rally point. They were caught by the advanced scouts of the Devourer fleet and consumed in minutes. The metal from their hulls, the energy from their power cores, even the organic matter from their crews, everything was absorbed and converted into more Devourer units. News of the early arrival spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire in the council chambers on Galactic. Central panic was beginning to set in. The carefully planned defense strategy was falling apart before the war had even begun. Admiral Zorketh of the Warrior Kas stood before the emergency session of the council. His species were professional soldiers who hired themselves out to other races as bodyguards and military advisors. They had been chosen to lead the unified fleet because they understood war better than anyone. We are looking at a worst-case scenario, he announced to the assembled delegates. The Devourers have grown beyond our projections, and they are moving faster than expected. Our current force distribution puts us at a 3-to-1 disadvantage. Worried murmurs filled the chamber. The crystalline beings chimed with anxiety. The floating jellyfish species pulsed with alarm colors. Even the usually calm plant-based Sylvani rustled their leaves in distress. We need every ship we can get, Admiral Zorketh continued. Even support craft and scout vessels could make a difference in the coming battle. For the first time in months, someone mentioned humanity in a council session. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Hegemony spoke up. The humans, he said, his voice sounding like breaking glass. What about their ships? They may be primitive, but they could serve as scouts or support craft. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Everyone remembered the dismissal 6 months earlier when they had voted to exclude humanity from the Alliance. It had seemed like such a clear decision. Then the humans were weak, their technology was outdated, their contribution would be meaningless now with extinction staring them in the face. Every ship mattered, every weapon, every soldier, every idea could be the difference between survival and being consumed by the mechanical swarm. Contact the human ambassador, ordered the council prime. Send them standard coalition terms. Offer them full membership if they provide their fleet. But when they tried to reach Ambassador Heian Wu, they discovered something disturbing. The Earth Embassy had been closed for 2 months. The building that had housed human diplomats for 20 years stood empty with only a simple sign reading, "Thank you for your hospitality." The council sent emergency communications to every human colony and outpost they could remember. The responses they got were even more disturbing than the empty embassy. There were no responses, not angry refusals or demands for apologies or even insults about being abandoned when they were not needed. Just silence, as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy overnight. Desperate, now the council authorized a full Investigation Admiral Zorketh assigned his best intelligence officers to find out what had happened to the humans. The first reports were confusing. Captain Rixmole of the Aquarian Intelligence Service investigated the human colony on Kepler 442b. What she found disturbed her more than any battlefield she had ever seen. The colony was empty, but it was not destroyed or abandoned in haste. Everything was clean, everything was organized. Everything valuable had been carefully removed, but nothing had been damaged or destroyed. It was like the humans had just decided to leave and had taken the time to clean up after themselves. The colony buildings were intact, the power systems were properly shut down, and there was even a note left in the Central Administration Building written in several alien languages. It simply said, "Thank you for allowing us to live here. We hope the next inhabitants find it as beautiful as we did." Similar reports came in from across human space. Every colony, every outpost, every research station was the same. Empty but clean, abandoned but organized. It was like humanity had vanished, but they had been very polite about it. The investigation team tried to track where the humans had gone, but it was impossible. Human ships had been seen leaving the colonies, but they had not gone to any known destinations. The ships had simply disappeared into the vast emptiness of space. On Earth itself, the situation was even more mysterious. The planet was still inhabited, but it had become completely isolated. All communication with the outside galaxy had been cut off. The space elevators had been dismantled, the orbital stations had been abandoned, and Earth had effectively removed itself from galactic civilization. A small fleet of Council ships approached Earth, hoping to make contact. What they found was a planet that had sealed itself off from the stars. Automated defense satellites orbited the world, not armed with weapons, but equipped with powerful communication jammers that made it impossible to contact the surface. The few signals that got through carried only one message, repeated in hundreds of languages. "Earth is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our decision and maintain your distance." Captain Meltor of the Tech Union tried to break through the communication barrier. Her species were the best computer experts in the galaxy, and she had equipment that could crack almost any code or bypass any security system. But the human systems were different. They were not trying to keep signals out, they were just asking politely for privacy. It was like trying to break into a house where the owner had simply asked you not to enter. The technology was not advanced, but it was polite. And somehow that made it impossible to ignore. Back in the council chambers, the delegates were beginning to understand what they had lost. When they had dismissed humanity, they had thought they were getting rid of a weak species that could not contribute to the war effort. Now they realized they had lost something much more important. They had lost the one species that might have been able to think of a solution. They had not considered humans. Had always been strange that way. Their technology was not the most advanced, but they used it in unexpected ways. Their military was not the strongest, but they won battles that should have been impossible. Their economy was not the largest, but they found ways to make everyone richer. Most importantly, humans had always been the species that asked different questions. When everyone else saw a problem and tried to solve it with bigger weapons or more ships, the humans would ask why the problem existed in the first place. The Lan of the Science Collective had worked with human researchers for years. She remembered how they approached problems. They would spend hours asking questions that seemed stupid until suddenly they would propose a solution that no one else had thought of. The humans always wanted to know how things worked. She told the council not just what they did or how to use them, but why they worked that way. They were always taking things apart to see what was inside. Now, as the Devourer fleet grew larger and more dangerous, the council realized they could have used that kind of thinking. The mechanical swarm was not just a military problem, it was a puzzle, and humans had always been good at puzzles, but humanity was gone, disappeared into the void between stars, and the galaxy was left to face the Devourers with conventional thinking and traditional strategies. The Devourers continued their advance, consuming the Rigel system, then the Vega colonies. Each victory brought them closer to the galactic core, where the remaining civilizations had gathered for what everyone assumed would be their final stand. And in the empty space where human colonies had once thrived, something was watching and waiting. The humans had not disappeared, they had just stopped talking to their former neighbors, but they were still listening. 6 months had passed since the Council meeting, and something strange was happening across human space. Captain Jinho stood on the bridge of his colony ship, New Seoul, watching the final preparations for what humans called Operation Silent Night. The name fit perfectly because everything they were doing was quiet and careful, like they were trying not to wake a sleeping giant. The colony ship was massive, bigger than most alien warships, but it was not built for fighting, it was built for moving. Entire populations from one star system to another. Jinho had been a colony captain for 15 years, and he had never seen an operation like this. One Lieutenant So Young looked up from her communications station. Captain, the vegan traders are asking permission to land again, she said. They sound confusion. Ho did not even look up from his data pad. Denied, he said calmly. Tell them our port is closed for maintenance. Indefinitely. So Young hesitated but followed the order. The vegans had been trading with this colony for over 10 years. They brought advanced medical equipment and took back human art and music. It was a good relationship that made both species happy, but now it was ending. On the main screen, Jinho could see the colony below. New Bizen had been home to 2 million humans for 20 years. They had built beautiful cities with parks and schools and hospitals. They had farms that grew food for 3 different alien species and factories that made things the galaxy needed. Now it was all being packed up. The humans moved like they had practiced this 1,000 times. Every family knew exactly what to take and what to leave behind. Every business owner had lists of what equipment to dismantle and what to abandon. The spaceport was busy day and night with ships loading cargo, but there was no panic, no shouting, no tears. Dr. Kyung-soo was supervising the loading of the medical center. He was the best doctor on the colony, and his research on alien diseases had saved thousands of lives across the galaxy. But today he was carefully packing his equipment and notes into sealed containers. A young healer named Softwing approached him. She belonged to a species that looked like angels with feathered wings and glowing skin. Dr. Kyung-soo, she said in her musical voice, where are you taking the medical supplies? Our people need them. Kyung-soo paused in his packing and looked at the alien he had worked with for 5 years. I am sorry, Softwing, he said. My people are calling me home. But what about the children in Ward 7? She asked. They cannot survive without the human medicine. Kyung-soo closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were sad, but determined. I have left 6 months' supply of all medications, he said, and the formula is to make more. Your people are smart. You will figure it out. Softwing watched as the human doctor sealed the last container and had it loaded onto a transport. The medical center that had been the heart of the colony for 2 decades was now just empty room. Similar scenes were happening across the galaxy on the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri. Dr. Chao was packing up 30 years of scientific work. Her alien colleagues watched in confusion as she sealed away research that could have changed the understanding of life itself. Dr. had discovered how to cure 3 different alien diseases, and her work on gravity manipulation had led to better space travel. But today she was putting it all in boxes marked with human symbols that no one else could read. Her research partner, Kliktar, looked like a giant praying mantis and had worked with her for 15 years. Where are you going? He asked, clicking his mandibles in distress. Our project on dimensional physics is almost complete. Ticha sealed another box and looked at her old friend. My people need me elsewhere, she said simply. Perhaps someday we will meet again under better circumstance. Kliktar did not understand what better circumstances meant, but he could see that Aa was not going to change her mind. He had known humans long enough to recognize that look. It was the same expression human parents got when they were protecting their children. Quiet, but absolutely determined. On the agricultural world of New Jeju, the harvest was in full swing, but this time the crops were not being sent to the usual buyers. The Aquarians had been buying human rice for 10 years because it grew better in their water cities than their own food. But today Captain Dong-wook was loading all the rice onto human ships. The Aquarian trade representative, Gilfin, floated in his water tank looking confused. Captain Dong-wook, he gurgled, where is our shipment? We have a contract. Dong-wook did not look up from his clipboard. Contract is cancelled, he said. All future deliveries are cancelled, but our people will go hungry. Gilfin protested. We depend on your food. Dong-wook finally looked at the Aquarian and his expression was not angry, just tired. I am sorry, he said. We cannot help you anymore. Gilfin floated in his tank making distressed bubbling sounds, but Dong-wook had already turned away to supervise the loading of another ship. The pattern was the same everywhere humans lived. Mining operations that had been jointly run with alien partners were quietly bought out or abandoned. Research facilities that had been sharing discoveries for decades suddenly stopped publishing papers. Trade routes that had connected human worlds to the galaxy were being shut down one by one. The withdrawal was so polite, so careful that it took months for the alien species to realize what was happening. Humans were not just leaving the Council, they were leaving the galactic community entirely. On Earth itself, the changes were even more dramatic. The space elevators that had connected the planet to orbital stations were being dismantled piece by piece. The orbital shipyards where human vessels had been built were being shut down. The communication arrays that had kept Earth connected to the galaxy were going silent. Min Su was the last human operator at the Earth Communications Center. He had spent 20 years talking to aliens across the galaxy, helping to coordinate trade and diplomacy and scientific cooperation. Now he was shutting down the systems that had made it all possible. His final transmission went out to every alien embassy and trading post in the solar system. "This is Earth Communications Center," he broadcast in 12 different languages. "We are ceasing all external communications. Effective immediately. Thank you for your patience and understanding." Then he powered down the massive transmitters that had carried human voices to the stars. The alien ambassadors on Earth were asked politely but firmly to leave. Human officials helped them pack and provided ships to take them home, but they were not allowed to stay. Ambassador Quindar of the Tech Union had lived on Earth for 8 years and considered many humans to be friends. "I do not understand," he said to the human official who was helping him pack. "Why are you doing this?" The human official, whose name was Youngmin, smiled sadly but did not answer the question. "Your ship is ready, Ambassador," he said. "Your belongings are already loaded." As Quindar left Earth for the last time, he looked back at the blue and white planet that had been his second home. The humans had been kind to him, had shown him their culture and their music and their strange human concept of hope. Now they were sending him away, not with anger, but with the same quiet determination they seemed to bring to everything. The few alien ships that tried to approach Earth after the withdrawal were met with a simple automated message: "Earth is no longer participating in galactic affairs. Please respect our decision and maintain your distance." The message was polite, even apologetic, but it was also final. There were no threats, no warnings, just a simple request that somehow carried more weight than any battleship. Within 6 months, human space had become a mystery. Colonies that had been thriving communities were now empty, but clean buildings stood intact but vacant. Ships continued to patrol the borders, but they would not respond to communication. The humans had not disappeared, they had just stopped talking to everyone else. The galactic community began to realize they had lost something important, but they could not figure out exactly what it was. Human technology had not been the most advanced, human military had not been the strongest, human economy had not been the biggest, but somehow the galaxy felt smaller without them, less interesting, less hopeful. And in the darkness between the stars, something was watching and waiting. The Devourers had noticed the changes too. They had been studying the galaxy, preparing for their next move, and they had just realized that one of the most unpredictable species had gone silent. That made them very curious indeed. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than 10 football fields put together. Ambassador Han Wu thought as he sat in the small human section. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, and the walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed colors with the mood of the room. Right now, the walls were flashing angry red and yellow. Yan Wu had been coming to these meetings for 5 years now. He was an old man with gray hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes looked tired. The human delegation was just 3 people in a room that held thousands of alien beings from across the galaxy. Each species had their own section with flags and symbols that meant nothing to most others, but everything to them. His assistant Baur sat next to him, tapping her fingers nervously on her tablet. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and the kind of energy that made her want to jump up and fix everything wrong in the universe. But today, she could only sit and watch as the galaxy decided what to do with her people. The third member of their group was Dr. Taemin, an elderly scientist who had spent his whole life studying alien cultures. He spoke 12 different alien languages and understood the customs of 40 different species. Today he just sat quietly shaking his head as he listened to the debate. Topic today was the Devourers. Everyone in the galaxy was scared of them. They were machines, not living beings who ate entire planets. They would show up in a solar system and just start consuming everything: rocks, metal, gases, even the energy from stars. They turned it all into more of themselves, making their fleet bigger and stronger. The first reports had come in. 6 months ago, a mining station in the Outer Rim had gone silent. When the rescue ships arrived, they found nothing. The entire asteroid belt had been eaten, leaving only empty space where millions of tons of rock and metal used to be. Since then, the Devourers had consumed 3 more systems. They were getting closer to the main galactic trade routes, and everyone was panicking. The big species with their massive fleets and advanced weapons were forming an alliance to fight them, but they were being very picky about who could join. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Hegemony was speaking now. His species looked like walking diamonds, and his voice sounded like glass breaking. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, and when he moved, the light bounced off his body in rainbow patterns. But his words were ugly. "We cannot waste resources on species that bring nothing to the fight," he said, and everyone could hear the contempt in his voice. "The humans have, 50 ships in their entire fleet. Their weapons are generations behind ours. Their population is barely 2 billion across all their worlds." Murmurs of agreement came from around the hall. The Zephyrians, who looked like giant floating jellyfish, pulsed with colors that meant yes in their language. The Saurian delegates, who were basically space dinosaurs, nodded their huge heads. The Aquarians, whose water-filled tanks bubbled with Aprovalian Wu, felt Biora tense beside him. Her hands were clenched into fists, and he could see she wanted to stand up and shout at them, but he put a gentle hand on her arm. She looked at him and saw him shake his head slightly. This was not the time. The debate went on for hours. Each species took turns explaining why humans should not be allowed. In the Alliance, the warrior caste said humans were too weak in battle. The Tech Union said human science was too primitive. The Trade Federation said human economics were too small to matter. Some species tried to defend humanity. The vegans, who were peaceful traders, spoke about how humans had always been honest in their dealings. The healers mentioned how human doctors had helped during the plague crisis on Kepler 7, but their voices were drowned out by the Majorité Ra. Had spent 3 years of her life working on integration protocols. She had learned alien languages, studied their customs, and written thousands of pages about how humans could fit into galactic society. She had believed with all her heart that humanity belonged among the stars, working together with other species to build a better future. Now, she watched as species after species voted to throw humanity away like garbage. The vote was not even close. Out of the 347 species in the Council, only 12 voted to include humanity. Even some of the species that humans had helped in the past voted against them. Fear made people selfish, and right now everyone was very afraid. When the final tally was announced, the Council Prime stood up. He was an insectoid being called a Mentari with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in colors humans could not even imagine. His voice was translated by machines, but somehow it still sounded cold and final. "The motion passes," he announced. "Humanity is hereby excluded from the Galactic Defense Coalition. They will receive no military support, no resource allocation, and no protection under our unified banner." The words hit the human delegation like physical blows. Dr. Taemin actually gasped and put his hand over his heart. Biora felt tears starting in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in front of these beings who had just abandoned her species. But Hyunwoo surprised everyone by standing up slowly. His movement was calm and dignified. He straightened his simple blue suit and looked around the massive hall. For a moment the chatter died down as thousands of alien eyes focused on the small human figure. "We understand your decision," he said in a voice that carried clearly through the hall. "Despite not being very loud, we will not trouble you further." His words were translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to every corner of the chamber. Then he did something that shocked many of the alien delegates. He bowed. The bow was deep and respectful, the kind that showed honor even in defeat. It was a human gesture that many species recognized as a sign of respect and farewell. Some of the aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected anger or pleading or threats. Instead, they got dignity and grace from a species they had just cast out. Many of them began to feel something they had not expected. Gilthian Wu turned and walked toward the exit. Bo-Ra and Dr. Taemin followed him their footsteps. Echoing in the sudden quiet, the human delegation moved with their heads held high, even though their hearts were breaking as they reached the massive doors that led out of the chamber. Han Wu paused and looked back one last time. His eyes swept across the assembly, taking in the sight of hundreds of species who had just decided humanity was not worth saving. Then he smiled. It was not a bitter smile or an angry one. It was the kind of smile a teacher might give to students who had just failed an important test, but would someday understand why. A small knowing smile that seemed to say, "You will remember this day." The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder in the corridor outside. Bo-Ra finally spoke. "Ambassador, what do we do?" Nojan Wu was quiet for a long moment, looking at the alien architecture around them, the strange symbols and the artwork that had once seemed so beautiful. Now it all looked cold and foreign. "We go home," he said simply. "We tell our people what happened, and we let them decide what comes next, but they just threw us away." Vera said, her voice cracking. "They did not even try to find a place for us." Dr. Temin put a hand on her shoulder. "My dear," he said gently, "sometimes the greatest gift is to be set free." The three humans walked through the corridors of the council building for the last time. Behind them, the debate continued as the alien species planned their war against the Devourers. They talked about strategy and resources and sacrifice, but they no longer talked about humanity. What none of them noticed was that Hyunwoo never stopped smiling, that small knowing smile. The smile of someone who had just been given exactly what he wanted, even if it did not look like a gift the galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs, and the universe would never be the same.